Hi, I'm Avian Rogers.
And I'm Les Cizik.
On today's show, we're going to teach you how to build several small but very useful little projects for around the house, like this audio cassette rack. A lot of these things also make wonderful gifts.
These small jobs are easy to do, and they'll also teach you the techniques you can use in larger projects in your shop. They're wonderful for a beginning woodworker to start with, and also lots of fun if you've got some experience.
So come down to the workshop and we'll get started.
We're going to show you how to make these two projects today. They're real confidence builders because they're projects you can start and finish in a single day. The first one is a bathroom rack. It's very simple to do. It's all straightforward cuts. You can see it has a towel bar down here on the bottom and a couple of shelves for other things you might have in the bathroom. Very simple part to cut. This is bandsawed out to this shape. It's got a couple of dado cuts, and the holes are drilled here to hold the towel bars. That's about all there is to it. The cassette rack is a little more difficult because we've got the same similar general construction, but the dado cuts are at an angle, and we have to cut an angle on the front of the shelves. Other than that, it goes together just like the bathroom rack. We're going to make the bathroom rack first. In a minute, we'll cut all the parts out and show you how it goes together. But before we do that, it's important before you start any project in your shop to have a good set of plans and understand them perfectly. Now here's a very good set of plans, and this is important to understand these before you cut the first piece of wood. As you can see, there's a front view, a top view, a side view, and an exploded view. Let's look at the exploded view first because that really helps us. It identifies every single part, the two sides, the two shelves, the two back pieces, and the towel bars that go down here. And it also, over here in the bill of materials, shows you exactly what the dimension of every one of those parts is, so you can't go wrong. Now let's take a closer look up here at the side view. It shows that the entire project is 22.5 inches high. Look at the detail here. 3 inches down from the top, you put your first shelf. It describes this detailed curve here. 12 inches between the two shelves, and the shelves, of course, are 3/4 inches, and it shows how the dado is cut. Another 3 inches down to the first towel bar, and here are your width dimensions. This first towel bar is 2 inches from the back. The next one is 3 inches from that one. So every detail of your plan is put right on here so you can't make any mistakes if you follow these plans. Now, having understood these, let's go to the saw and start cutting these parts out.
To start building our bathroom rack, the first thing we need to do is cut out our pieces. Now we've got a few different pieces to cut out. We've got our two sides, shelves, and then the back. Now there are varying lengths and widths. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start by cross-cutting our pieces to length. Cross-cutting means we're cutting across the grain, and ripping means we're cutting with the grain. Now we're making our cuts with a table saw, but you could use a hand circular saw too. Now I've got the saw set up now to cut my sides so that they'll come out exactly the same length. Now the way I did that is I set up this stop block here. So I just push the board right up against that stop block, make my cut, and then I'll push the board up against the stop block again, and it'll come out exactly the same length. Now the reason I can't use the rip fence for that is when I'm using the miter gauge and the rip fence, that's very dangerous because it could cause the board to bind in the saw and kick back. So never do that. I want to point out one more thing before I make my cut too, is when you buy your wood at the lumber yard, don't assume that the ends are perfectly square. So what I've already done is I already squared my board up. What I did is since I know that the miter gauge is running at a perfect 90 degrees, I already ran it through the saw and squared it up. So I'm ready to go. Roll up the sleeves. Check it. And we're rolling. Now that we have our pieces cross-cut to the proper length, now what we do is we rip our pieces to the proper width. And one thing I'll point out is that the sides are the exact same width of the shelves. So one setting is going to do is for all those parts. Now over here, I've got the saw set up at an exact 8 inches. I measured from the ripping fence to the inside of the blade. That way we'll be cutting on the scrap side of the line and we'll end up with an exact 8 inches. And the ripping fence will keep our board running nice and parallel to the blade. we have this fingerboard set up right here so that it will exert a light pressure against the board and keep it pushed up right against that rip fence right there. And one thing I want to say too, when you make your cut, don't ever reach across the blade to get your board. Either let it drop to the floor, get somebody to catch it for you, or use a roller stand like we are. I get my sleeves up, and we are ready to roll.
A nice way to make these dado cuts is on the table saw set up to cut dados. These dados will support the shelves in our piece. Now let me show you what we have to do with the table saw to get ready. First of all, you'll notice the guard has been removed. That's because the dado is not a through cut, and the guard would be in the way. We would not be able to pass the wood through here. The next thing we did was put in a different table insert, which permits the dado set to come up through the table itself. And then we had to make a couple of test cuts. Let me show you what a dado set looks like. Dado set is simply a stack of blades set up to the exact width of the cut we want. Now before we actually run the stock through the machine, we're going to make a couple of test cuts on a piece of scrap. Look at there. The first one I made was not deep enough. It was also too sloppy. The second one I made, just right. So I know that the dado is set exactly where I want it. And I've also set so I get it in exactly the right place, and I can cut both sides just the same. I've set up this little block, and I know that the dado will go through the board in exactly the right place. That's about all there is to it. It's a pretty simple setup. Got my stock here, ready to go. Put it right up against the block.
You can also cut your dados using a router, and I position the sides right up next to each other so that when we run the dado across there, our shelves are going to line up perfectly once we go to assemble it. So everything is clamped down, and I made sure that this guide board is square to the sides using this framing square. And I also positioned it so that when I run the router along that guide board, the straight bit is going to cut